Hi, and welcome to a special Santa Barbara Authors Edition of Newsmakers. I'm Jerry Roberts. It is Thursday, March 30th, which, among other things, is the penultimate day of Women's History Month. And who better to be talking to on such an august day than Dr. Lois Phillips, pioneering feminist, communications, media consultant, educator, and author, and we're going to be talking about her new book a little bit later. But hey, welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time, Lois, to join us today.
I'm delighted. Thank you.
Now, in the interest of full disclosure, we did originally talk about having you at the beginning of Women's History Month, but life intervened. So better late than never, as we say around newsmakers. If it's news to us. Now Women's History Month has been around sort of, well, it really began as Women's History Week in Sonoma County back in the 70s. I think President Jimmy Carter was the first president to have a resolution. What was the idea at the time, and what is it morphed into?
Well, I don't know about the morphing, but Women's History Month is an opportunity to really talk about and make clear to those unenlightened about the contributions of women, both past and present, who helped build this country. And unfortunately, their contributions haven't often been covered in social studies textbooks and history books, except given a cursory glance. So it was a very important thing that he did to say, let's make visible what women have contributed to the fights for equality and justice and opportunity in the country. And I think that I think it's still very viable. I was thinking about this as someone who I didn't burn my bra, that passed me by. I was busy having a baby that day. But, so I was very inspired by women like, Betty Friedan and Gloria Steinem in those days in the 70s. But here we had with the Me Too movement, I think a revelation about how social media, one of the good things, can spread the word about misogyny in this country, and the need to really have women express themselves about where they see injustice and practices that need to be addressed publicly. And we know what happened with that. And the great thing about this is the diversity of women who participated online and who talked about their experiences in the workplace. So it isn't just history in the boring textbook academic sense, that kind of thing, but we're living history. We're living women's history every day, and women are making history every day. So yeah. I think it's great because we have cities, counties, states saying, today we're going to have a special program. Companies are saying, let's honor the women executives in our company or our agency who are leaders. Let's put the spotlight on them, and they become role models and mentors. So it's good to use the day or the month as a chance to highlight what women are doing.
Yeah, I guess, devil's advocate here for a moment. I'll play the aging white male geezer.
Good. Okay.
I mean, in 1978, women couldn't get a credit card on their own. I mean, a lot of things have changed. Nobody heard from gender studies or women's history programs and so on and so forth. It just seems like 57% of college undergraduates are women now. So, I mean, there've just been so many changes that it almost is Women's History Month all the time. No, I mean, talk a little bit about why it's still a thing.
Okay, I'm rising to the occasion. How's that? Okay, power to the people. I think we have to, let's look at the government. Let's look at we have 51% of the population represented by, just trying to think, I've got my numbers here, 29% of our congressional representatives are women. That, we need to up those numbers. So we have a problem in terms of the numbers of women elected. And in the Senate, women hold 25 of 100 seats. And that's the same number they held. It was really the Congress where we saw, I think, 12 new women join Congress. So government is one area we really have to make progress. And Yes, you're absolutely right. More women than men are earning baccalaureate degrees. But women are advancing, I think, to at least 50% of those enrolled in law schools. We still don't see very many women, 17% or 23% in engineering, science, and technology, computer science. And by the way, when I think about social media and I think about so many challenges we face today, we really need to have women's voices at the table when technology discussions and decisions and debates are held. And that's a real problem. So thank God for STEM. That may
And thanks to our own former state senator Hannah Beth Jackson,
yes, yes,
at least in California,
yes.
more women on corporate boards and less that gets tossed out in court. But
Wait a minute, but that has been challenged,
yeah,
and
it has been challenged.
corporations rose up as one to say this is absolutely inappropriate and what's the big deal. So the great thing is that that legislation, the pay equity legislation that she proposed, and the women on corporate boards really has spread to other states. So we're seeing, this is the great thing I've learned personally, is that change doesn't happen in 5 minutes. I remember thinking at a certain point in my life, well, it's all been taken care of. We have the pregnancy discrimination bill. When I was teaching high school, in my 3rd month, I had to resign because my students couldn't see me pregnant. So, things have changed for the better, definitely, Jerry. There's no doubt.
Well, maybe. I mean, it's just
Maybe not enough.
no, well, no, it's just it's not a forward march into history. You know what I mean? It's like sometimes I think it's one step forward, 2 steps back. I mean, here, all of these issues that were so settled. I mean, honestly, when Obama was elected in 2008, I thought, oh, we really are living
It's
in a
all taken care of. Yeah.
yes, and Roe
End
v.
of
Wade
racism.
and
No racism.
all of these things, that somehow we're now relitigating. But just to close on Women's History Month,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
every year there's a theme, and the theme this year is celebrating women who tell their stories.
Mhm.
And I just read the theme recognizes women past and present who have been active in all forms of media and storytelling, including print, radio, TV, stage, screen, blogs, podcast, news, and social media, which is really right in your wheelhouse because that's what you do. I mean, and that's really been,
Mhm.
I think, the theme of your professional life is helping women to speak publicly, whether it's a corporate presentation or a political speech or things of that category. And also that's what your new book is about. Talk a little bit about your professional career and the kind of consulting you do and what that is.
Oh, you're so nice to ask. Thank you. Well, I'm at the age where we need about a few hours to do that because I was just talking to Starshine Rochelle yesterday about how when you have a lot of interests and you have some paths you can follow, you make a lot of pivots. So I started out many years ago as a high school speech communication teacher, teaching Shakespeare and drama, and loved it. And then no pregnancy discrimination law, as I said. So, but later went to grad school, ended up at UCSB doing a doctorate, and my dissertation was on teaching public speaking to overcome anxiety in men and women. And I had to delve into the history of women because there was so much written about men's speaking style, but I had to go to the history books, and Dr. Barbara Lindeman helped me look at the history of women's suffrage and all those wonderful women. So I became very interested in the rhetorical traditions. And as Oprah Winfrey said, we stand on the shoulders of those who came before us, but we didn't really know that much about these amazingly courageous women. So I became interested in the history and then how to bring that information and what I learned from sociolinguists like Deborah Tannen and others about women's speaking style, which is often deferential, to training women in politics, training women in business, training women in government for how to gain credibility as the voice of authority, which is traditionally a male voice. So it has to do with your vocal variety, upward inflections. Is that really important? I'm not really sure. We should do this. and the ways in which women's speaking style can undermine the most brilliant ideas. And it's great because my clients have all been extremely intelligent and knowledgeable. Most didn't like to speak. They were in technology or accounting or finance or other positions. And it wasn't part of their wheelhouse when they, took a deep dive into their discipline and their training. So it's been great because they quickly learn the skills, not rocket science, with coaching and thanks to videography, seeing themselves. So I have to say it's been great. I learned a lot myself about campaign communication and ways in which women running for public office really have to push against a double standard in the way that audiences evaluate their speaking style. And by the way, Hillary Clinton's, loss really was enlightening, not just for those who are scholars, and we're not surprised, but the likability issue and the way that she presented herself as a law professor in my book, or as an academician, was interpreted as patronizing and arrogant and elitist and so forth. So she lost the presidency. And I think that women have to walk a fine line between being too relational, too soft, and and having an edge, being too strong, too direct. It's not easy,
Has that changed in the time that you've been doing this kind of work, and even going back, I think, to your PhD
Yeah.
thesis at the Converge School, right?
Yeah.
I mean, has it changed? Do you see the same issues, the same hesitancy, lack of confidence and so on in the clients that you see? Are the problems different?
That is an interesting question. I think in the more mature women, I think they get it quickly and they're more knowledgeable and they've gone through training and such. But I have to say, I have 2 points of view about younger women. First of all, I think they're amazing. They grew up with, many of them, with working mothers. They have a certain attitude about work is what they're going to do, and they're going to advance and all of that. And that's great. And many are feminists. They've been enlightened, empowered by the Dobbs decision, which was horrifying and affects them more than it does me, except it enrages me. But younger women I've seen so much of this Valley girl talk, the upward inflections, the tentativeness, the feminine way of, I'm not sure, this is important, kinds of things that I think older women are just more aware of for various reasons. So I think the training that HR departments do in business and agencies is critical to training women in how to be direct and making a pitch, sharing a big idea confidently, because we need women's voices at the table in shaping the future.
Yeah. I have a theory, a cultural theory. This all goes back. There was a film. I don't know if you recall it. Well, I wouldn't call it a film. There was a movie called Valley Girl, and I don't know. I want to say it was sometime in the mid '90s because I remember taking my daughters to it and feeling ashamed of myself when I left the theater. But it was that whole style of speaking where the end of every sentence is a question, which, as you say, really goes to the voice of authority. And it just seems like every young woman I meet, under the age of, I don't know, 30,
Yeah, I would agree.
has that linguistic quirk, which is not healthy, I don't think.
And we understand, you especially as much as anyone or more, the power of the media. And we have a media-centric culture and a youth-centric culture, and girls grow up looking at the images of feminine women through every form of media and having a picture in their head of what a woman is like, and becoming sexual earlier and needing men's approval. And so I think I'm so thrilled about the work of Girls Inc. and Girl Scouts and those agencies that are training girls to be bold and beautiful and smart and leaders, because I place my hope in that kind of education and self-development. There's too many pressures that mitigate against that.
Yeah.
against that empowerment feeling. I'm entitled to be heard when I say something. Don't interrupt me. I remember the vice president, Kamala Harris, I think it was in the debates,
Yeah.
said,
With the
I'm
pants.
speaking.
Yeah. I'm
Speaking. I
speaking.
love that phrase. I'm speaking. And men tend to, this research from Harvard about the ways in which men interrupt women at meetings. And they're very entitled to be heard. And this notion of entitlement is very thematic in the scholarly research. And I do want to say, another thing about being positive, if we're talking about history and where we are, I was thinking about the Fuller Project, which gives a voice to women in journalism where their articles might not normally be published elsewhere. They have a vehicle, a venue. There's the broadsheet, I think it's from Forbes, that covers everything about women in business, the issues, the challenges, successes. There's the Lily, and the Women's Media Center. Ms. does a great deal with media. So I'm seeing ways in which women in the media are finding ways, if they can't through mainstream media, doing NPR shows. You look at the number of women anchors on MSNBC, it's really tremendous. So I do feel positive in spite of, the frustrations with Congress.
And, to the extent that newspapers still matter at all, which is, I think, an open question, that majority of people in newsrooms, of working in newsrooms, are women now as well, which is astonishing to me. When I started at the Chronicle in 1977, there was one woman, the great Carolyn Ansbacher, who had been there since the 40s or something. And I mean, it was astonishing. And
Right.
I think, changed throughout my career to have more women. All right, let's talk about your book a little bit, which is kind of manifests a lot of these ideas that you're talking about different communication styles. The history of women as speakers. When women speak up, they
I
change
just
history.
happen to have one here. Yes, here it is.
Plenty of free parking. Okay, what is the book? Tell us about the content.
Well, the book is an attempt to pull together some of the interesting work that most, except for historians, most of us would never know about these amazing women. And I was just looking at some of these old, wonderful daguerreotypes in the 18th, the 17th, 18th century. And, the women who had the nerve to get up and argue in early colonial America about the right to own land. And, just what happened to them when they did. They took tremendous risks, not just the mockery and derision we see in cancel culture today, for example, but they lost power. They lost their land. They weren't entitled to anything if they were not married, and the father would leave the land to brothers. So, each one of these really provided a foundation for the next one. And I was thinking about a couple of them might be interesting. One is Deborah Gannett. She, when it insisted on fighting in the Revolutionary War, disguising herself as a male. So she went on the speaker circuit. She cut her hair short. She wore pants. I mean, this was
Good thing
absolutely
Governor DeSantis didn't hear about this. She wouldn't have been allowed to do
right.
that.
Frances Wright in the early 1800s, short curly hair and pants. And what does she talk about? Free love, universal education, religious freedom and equality for women. This is the 1800s. I didn't know anything about her. And then, brilliant Black women, Frances, I'm trying to think of Maria Stewart. She became such a respected orator and fought for, she addressed controversial issues that nobody else would touch. So, we have a history that is actually interesting if you just are the kind of person who's curious, that we should know about. But also, it's like, the issues were raised in the 1600s, the 1700s, the 1800s. So when I see young women who are complacent, I just, have to bite my lip, because you take this for granted. And then we have the Dobbs decision overturning 50 years of reproductive choice. It's like, no, 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 you can't be complacent. And I think what I learned from the research for this, because I went back to my dissertation and looked at so much more scholarship has happened since my dissertation was finished, so many years ago. And that's great. But I think in general, you do take a risk, and Senator Hannibal Jackson has really experienced this. When you stand up to speak up and assert a big idea, you push against the establishment. You're basically saying, I know more than you do, which is rather arrogant. I'm the expert. Listen up, because I'm going to change your life if you listen to what I have to say. I mean, that's not the way we raise little girls, to think that what they have to say could change the world.
But is it really arrogant? I mean, that's the interesting thing. Yes, for who perceives it as being arrogant?
Right. It's just it pushes against the conventional stereotype about women, and the fact that you're backstage, you're helping to put someone front stage, and that's why in working with women who are running for office or being a part of feminist advocacy, I'm just so thrilled to see women who are willing to, have the courage to give their time and mobilize others to challenge the establishment and say, I have something important to say. And these debates can get pretty nasty, as we've seen televised debates, but even local debates around land use in our area can get very nasty. And you have to hold your ground. And I think I feel inspired actually at this age. I feel good about what I see coming up in the way of leadership at every level. And that there are women who have really important ways. I'll give you a great example in the business world. In when Volvo was designing their car, and I think this is a good 15 years ago, they brought some women designers in and women engineers to rethink the whole dashboard, the whole front seat for how women travel with a purse. They want a coffee cup and they want to have their phone handy, and they made it woman friendly, and it became a very popular car because the improvements for women were in general improvements. But I think that's the big issue is I'm reading all of these historical figures arguing for, and Black women and white women and married women and women of different financial positions in life. They were talking about equality. They were talking about it's only fair. Like, what else is new? It's only fair. And I love this quote. I found it today. Let's see if I have it handy. The actor Justin Baldoni was saying, he was interviewed, I think it was an NPR radio interview, of course, produced by women. And he was talking about the difference between men and women. He said, I always thought that humanity has two wings, the male and the female, and these wings need to be equivalent in strength in order to fly. And I just love that image, of each of us, male and female, bring our differences to the discussions and debates that will make this a better world. And that inspires me when I see more women at the table, wanting to be at the table, taking those risks.
All right. Just for the record, while you're inspired, I believe we're in the early stages of human extinction event, Lois. So
okay, what is it?
I'm not as
well, I'm optimistic about women.
Optimistic. Women. All right.
Yeah, hey, not about what you're going to say. I have a feeling I know. Keep going.
So wait a minute before we go too far past the title of the book. Where can people get the book?
Oh, it's on Amazon, of course. And, this probably isn't so smart to say, but it's very inexpensive, especially the ebook version. And the great thing about the ebook version is, I really take this issue of women's voice into the 21st century. And the back of the book has, I think it's 26 speeches, starting with Sojourner's speech as read by an actress. Let's see, as read by the author Alice Walker, starting with her speech down to Stacey Abrams' speech. And with the ebook, you just click and you can get to hear those
Oh,
speeches.
that's very cool.
And that's the
very cool.
ebook.
Hey, I want to talk about some of these things that you were just talking about. Uh, People, I don't know, everybody's under the age of 30 now, so they probably don't remember that you were one of the founding members of the Women's Political Committee, one of perhaps the most important women's.
Oh, no, definitely not. But thank you.
In Santa Barbara. And that president's luncheon is coming up actually at the end of the month for those. But, I'm curious how, again, how have the issues changed? Because, again, a second wave feminism, if you will, in the 70s. I mean, the issues were so fundamentally economic and so on. And then, of course, the women of color felt, maybe, white women were leaving them behind, and we had, intersectionality and so on. And now today, a lot of questions of gender fluidity and, the rights of trans people and so on. It's really broadened out. What is the moment that we are in terms of these of gender politics? You've mentioned the Dobbs decision several times, and that was, Roe v. Wade in 1973 was just such a huge deal for feminists. I mean, for women in general. And now, to have it thrown back 50 years later, that's astonishing that we are relitigating these kinds of things. I mean, just where are we what's the political atmosphere about it, these issues?
Well, thank you for mentioning the Women's Political Committee and the speaker. I just wanted to say the speaker at the annual luncheon, which is produced by the former presidents, we're hanging tight, is really about the power of social media and the impact of cancel culture on political campaigns. So, we're wanting to keep that conversation going and sparked by what's really happening. In the case of Mayor Karen Bass having won, to everyone's surprise, at least in some cases, difficult campaign. So I think in terms of, what's to be happy about right now with this decision, you couldn't make it up. And again, I think those women who have been complacent about the achievements and advancements were awakened from their coma to realize that who we elect has profound influence on us today, life today, the choices we have over our body. By the way, there was a great sign in Kentucky by a young woman in which she said, and dealing with the trans issue and all of the complexity of that and the tension around sexuality and who gets to define your sexuality for yourself. And as she said, it was never about a bathroom, just as it was never about a water fountain. And I really loved that, because we're really talking about human rights and dignity. And those are the issues that, I'm writing about in this book, looking at the 16th century and what women were talking about. So we just have this ongoing debate, and we need to have more of us fighting for equality. And when this started, when the Women's Political Committee started, it was a group of us. I think there were about 24 different roles, different professions, backgrounds, ages, saying, something's wrong here. And we brought Betty Friedan to our little provincial city to wake people up. And we're still having to do that. I think that,
But didn't you think these were all, that this was a settled?
I thought it was all settled. Yeah, I did. And I guess my research kept me on more of the cutting edge in terms of looking at the number of women in business. And, there was a big, whoop-de-doo when, for the first time in the Fortune 500 list of who's in charge, now we have more than 10% of Fortune 500 companies led by women. And that was cause for cheering on Wall Street. So, women have a long way to go. I know the numbers. I know I've been reading about the payouts, and there was a great walkout at Google when two employees who were accused of sexual misconduct, I don't remember the amount, $20 million or something, some amazing amount. And they were terminated with these multi-million-dollar payouts. Still, they walked away with dignity and money. And the women who are bringing the suits are paying out of pocket for their lawsuits. So, I think if you read, you're aware that not everything has been resolved. And I don't just mean scholars, you just read those headlines and maybe read page 2. But we have a long, what is it? We've come a long way, baby. The Virginia Slims ads in the
Now
whenever
that is second wave feminine. Boy, that was, yeah,
I'm
women.
dating myself, but
Women have their own cigarettes. Yes.
we have our own cigarettes and we can smoke a lot and stay very skinny, like Twiggy, who had no breasts. So,
and they were the sponsors of the Billie Jean King, the tennis tournament. Yeah.
Well, she told them good. But seriously, I do think that, maybe this is a good place to end our discussion if we're going towards the media. I do think it's very important to have coverage of women's lives in every way. And I was reading about an NPR, a group of retired women. See, when you retire, retired women don't go away these days, like here I am. We're still doing stuff. And women who retired from academic roles went to the NPR station and said, we need a talk show about women's voices to really talk about women's lives and what we've learned, our wisdom from living, from making do with less, from earning less, from raising families, juggling. We have a story to tell. And I had a TV show, as you know, we've chuckled about it, in 76 when I interviewed Jane Fonda. And I grabbed celebrities from UCSB and talked to them when they were passing through. But I also had someone from, I think it was sex education classes at Planned Parenthood. We used the word orgasm on cable television, probably for the first time, and a few other words I won't go into, with 2 women talking about sexual education and birth control on this little cable TV show. And it was in 76. And I was so thrilled. But why? Because the FCC ruled that local cities had to provide local producers access to television time. And a beautiful studio was built. And I was the first woman with Pacific Coast Video to have a show. And the topics we covered, would never have been covered by a male producer. And one of them was the changing nature of the family. And, things like that. So I, from my own experience as a local person in what I consider a fairly small city, I think we have tremendous opportunities to talk to the public about issues through a different lens, the way we see it and the way we're experiencing it. So I mean, I don't mean to sound like, Little Mary Sunshine here, but I've learned so much about ways to wiggle into moments of opportunity to be heard. And I want to encourage other women at every age, including those over 70, who have a lot to share, to write op-eds, to write letters to the editor, to get on air, as I did today. And thank you for that, Jerry. So that's kind of where I'm coming from, is to try and help educate people and diverse women for opportunities to speak their minds.
All right. Well, gee, there's so much we could talk about, such a rich series of issues that you've raised, Lois. But the book is The History of Women as Speakers. When Women Speak Up, They Change History. You can get it on Amazon. You get the ebook and get the links to the speeches themselves. So, Lois Phillips, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. And we'll see you. We'll see you around town. Take care.
Thank you.